Hello and welcome to Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and here we are. It's another year, 2023 and season 4. Welcome back, everybody. As I say goodbye to 2022 and season 3, I'd like to personally thank everyone who has listened to the podcast and watched on YouTube. I appreciate your patronship. Thank you to all who have liked, shared, subscribed, and commented on the show. And a big thank you for donating via Patreon. I appreciate your generosity and your support. So a big thank you. In today's episode, my guest Raini Shae and I will be discussing relationships. One of the top 3 questions I get when doing readings for clients is about love and relationship. So today, my guest, Raini Shae, is going to be discussing relationship attachment theory, needs, and the 3 toxic traps most couples fall into when in conflict. But before I introduce Raini, I'm going to read her bio. Raini Shae is a blogger and relationship coach. She earned her degree in social work 12 years ago and uses her education as well as all she has learned in her 13 years of marriage to help her clients learn the conflict resolution skills needed to create an unbreakable bond with their partner. Raini is the host of the annual Relationship Reboot Summit and a featured expert on the Manifest Love Show. Raini, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk about relationships, my favorite topic.
Me too. So before we get into all the juicy details about what you offer, I'd like to first ask, because everybody has a path to their purpose, right? So what experiences in your life led to helping others in this way?
So the relationship coach piece that I do, in my marriage, that's what it was. It's everything. Like I got my degree in social work before I got married. So I already had a heart, for helping people through some things. And I had my own story with trauma and seeking counseling and all that kind of stuff. So I already knew that I really love people and I really want to help people. But then I got married and it is just so much harder than you ever think it will be. Like even though you love this person so much, it's just hard and life makes it hard. And so my husband and I, we sought help for our relationship every other year for the first 10 years. And I really credit that in what I learned in that time with what I do now. Because what we found was this attachment theory approach that I just feel like it could change everyone's lives. And it changed mine for sure. We got to a point where about 6 years ago, we got to a point where we couldn't even get along in day-to-day life, which was a new hard for us and a new version of low for us, right? Like before, we'd always had stuff we were working through and learning, but we could always set it aside and just live happily together. But about 6 years ago, we just were in this place where it felt like we can't even talk to each other without everything becoming an argument. And then I remember one night we were upset. We lived in a small apartment. We had little tiny kids. We have 3 kids. And I was so upset and I just wanted to leave because I didn't want to traumatize my children with me going to the bedroom and crying because you could hear everything through the walls, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I just need a break. And I left and I still can see my oldest daughter, who was like 6, looking out the window and watching me leave and her little face. And it was just so sad. And then I drove away, cried for a few hours in the car, came back home. The kids were in bed by then. And when I walked in, my husband was on the phone with a family member talking to her about divorce. And I didn't even know that was a possibility in our lives. Like it had not even crossed my mind. And I was so floored that we were in this place where I just was like, what is happening to us? And after that, we started counseling again, and we learned this approach that uses what's called attachment theory, and it changed everything. It just taught us what we needed to know. And it's been so pivotal that now that my kiddos, my youngest is now off in school and I have the time, and I just had, that's where I am. That's why I decided like a couple years ago, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach people how to take this approach that we learned that brought us from almost divorced to, well, not almost divorced, like papers and stuff, but brought us to thinking about that, to where we are now, where literally I feel like I have a fairy tale relationship. Like, it is just everything I could have ever wanted. And it's wonderful. And my kids never have to have that kind of experience again. Because the next morning, my daughter came up to me, the 6-year-old, and was like, "Mommy, you're back." And I was like, "Of course I'm back." And she's like, "I didn't know if you were ever coming back." And it broke my heart. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't even realized like how it was affecting my kids. So yeah, that's why I do what I do, is because they're skills, Liz. Like, these literally are skills that can be learned, and that is so hopeful. And I just feel like I can teach it. Just let me teach you, and then you can have this amazing relationship that you want.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Raini. I really appreciate your story, and I love how you've taken your experience and turned it into sharing with others. As they say, the next stage in healing is sharing what you've learned with others, right? And helping them with their experiences. So let's dive right into attachment theory. So what is attachment theory?
Well, it's so important because relationships are our lives, right? Like, as people, we're social creatures and we need attachments. And attachments, when I say attachments, it's just your relationship. So attachment theory is that you go out in the world and you create attachments. Some, you're just like your parents, you're born into this, so you're going to have some kind of attachment to your parents. And there's different types. But the important part for what I do is just knowing that that's what we're talking about, is that people create attachments. And so when you're in a romantic relationship, which is what I deal with, people who are in committed coupleships, but they're struggling with conflict and knowing how to handle and how to get through it, right? But attachment is any kind of relationship. So you just need to know that that's what you've done, right? Like, be aware. You have decided to formally engage in an attachment with someone. And then the important thing to know, first of all, is how attachments work. So it's like, the infinity sign, the sideways 8. When we're in an attachment with someone, when we're in a relationship, it's like you come together like this. And what happens is we have an action, and because you're connected to your person, you're going to have a reaction. And then that reaction is going to cause you to do something, have an action, which is going to cross over and affect your partner. And we're in these constant states as people of this loop with energy, essentially, is what it is. You're exchanging, words and actions. And what happens is someone does something and you have a thought first. And these happen lightning quick, so fast. But if we slow it down, that's what the process looks like. Is your partner does something, you have a thought about that creates a feeling inside of you about what just happened. And then you spit out a reaction, which causes your partner to have a thought, which creates a feeling. And we get into these looped cycles, which is where I teach people about the 3 toxic traps that most partners fall into. And that's what these are, is they're looped cycles that we just fall into lightning quick. And there are 3 different patterns that most couples fall into.
That's awesome. I love that super simple way that you just described triggers,
Mhm.
right? How we
Yeah.
get triggered by what other people do and say, right?
Yes. Yeah, always. And it can be positive or negative. We are constantly, that's part of, as social creatures, we're always seeking equilibrium. We're
Mhm.
always seeking to, we make meaning. That's what our brains do, is we constantly make meaning. And so it's all the time, whether it's positive, negative, and especially when you have an attachment, like an intimate attachment to a partner, you're connected to that person in such a way that you're always checking. You're sending out little signals all the time, little messages, little things that you do to check in that you may not even, well, most people don't realize. You know, we do
Mhm.
it constantly where we're like, are you with me? Or do you have my back? Those kinds of things. And yeah, we're just always doing that to make sure we're okay. And is our relationship okay? And that's part of attachment theory as well, is recognizing that when our brain wants to have a strong, safe attachment. And so that's what we do. We're trying to check, like, am I okay? Am I safe in this relationship? Do you have my back? Do you love me? There are all these questions of attachment. So when you get triggered by something, that's what's triggered, is the attachment, is your suddenly the attachment is called into question in some way, shape, or form. And then you fall into these patterns.
Right. What are the different types of attachments?
So, well, the three patterns of behavior, there's the attachment theory. We could go off on a totally different thing for attachment theory and talk
Right.
about like securely attached and anxious attachment and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But for the conflict resolution, like, it's all important to know, right? Because
Yes.
we're whole human beings and knowledge is power. So the more you know about this kind of stuff, the better. But for getting started, for someone who doesn't know anything, understanding how attachment works and then moving into being able to recognize these three traps is where I start with people, what I specialize in. So the three traps that we have that you can start to look for are what I call hide and seek, withdraw and retreat, hide and seek, withdraw and retreat, and find the bad guy or the blame game.
Ooh.
So each partner coupleship will usually have a pattern that they fall into. Not everybody stays in just one trap.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people will move through all three. Sometimes they'll just have two that are their favorites. Sometimes they'll stay in one. But as I describe these, your listeners can think about it, think about your relationship and what do we do? What are we falling into? And then, because that's going to be your very first step, recognizing what you're doing, right?
Nice.
So start with, let's start with,
Let's start with hide and seek.
sure, hide and seek. That's a good one. Yeah, that is the one that my husband and I that was our favorite trap to fall into. And that one is pretty common. In general, your hider is usually the man, your seeker is usually a woman, but it's not always the case.
Why do
Just
you
in
think that
general.
is? Why do you think it would be more women over men?
Personally, this is just my opinion, and this is completely based on nothing but my opinion. But
That's
I
right.
think it's because of how we raise men and women in Western society. That's just my opinion. But I think it's because we teach little girls that they can express their emotions. And we teach little boys that they need to shut it up and zip it up
Yes.
to a certain extent. But that's just what I think is why. It could be something else. I don't know. But anyway, so with hide and seek, what will happen is you'll get into, so for my husband and I'll use us for an example because
Mhm.
this was our thing, is something would come up, one of us would get triggered, and you would start to feel inside like, ooh, I don't think we're okay. What's happening is, we are not okay. And that's the other thing that I help people learn, is that usually what triggers the argument, you're not really fighting about that. There's usually an undercurrent, there's an underbelly of emotion, and that's where that attachment fear lives. So if you start fighting about the dishes, you're not really fighting about the dishes. That's just the symptom. Underneath, there's a root problem under there that's tapping on that attachment, saying, and it's sending an alarm in your brain that says your attachment is in danger, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So something would trigger, and I would feel uncomfortable, and I would panic on the inside, and I would be like, oh, we got to fix this right now, because I can't stand how uncomfortable this disconnection feels. And so I would come at my husband with my feelings or my solutions or whatever it was. And he would then feel uncomfortable with, one, the disconnection. He's already feeling uncomfortable there. Two, then he starts feeling uncomfortable because he starts to feel like, I can't fix it. I want to fix it. I want my wife to be happy. I want her to feel connected to me and loved by me, but she's not. She's upset. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know what to do to fix it. If I try to fix it, lots of times it just makes it worse, because he would be distracted by the symptoms, right?
Mm.
So he would be trying to fix whatever it was that I was upset about, and it wouldn't touch on the root problem. And so I would be unsatisfied, and I'd be like, but no, and keep pestering. And so then he would hide, and he would pull up a wall, which is why I call it hide and seek, because you have one partner who withdraws, and they can withdraw emotionally or physically or both, but it's a withdrawal of some kind. Mm-hmm. So for him, what it used to be was he would just kind of pull up an emotional wall, and he would disconnect inside, and he would just stare off into the distance. And I would be talking, and it felt like literally talking to a brick wall. So he wouldn't leave specifically, like physically, but he would just be gone. And I would be like, and then what happens is you get into this pattern where, so then I would up my ante. I'd be like, no way, I'm not letting you go. I'm not letting you hide. You can't do that. You have to work this out with me. I need you to be here for me. I need you to talk to me about this. I need you. I need you. I need you. And I would get louder, and I would get more insistent, and I would push harder. I also, this was just something I did, but I would also reframe things. So I would say the same message over again, but in a different way. Mm-hmm. Because in my mind, I thought, okay, well, he's not responding, so he must not understand what I'm saying. And so then I would just start over, because I'm very verbal, in a different way. But the more I did that, the deeper he would retreat from me. And that's what this pattern looks like. And it just, keeps going and going and going.
Mm-hmm. So for someone in that pattern, and from your experience, how do you shift that?
Well, one of the things that really helped us specifically with withdraw or with hide and seek, mm-hmm. was learning about something called flooding that can happen. And that I thought that my husband was just, he either didn't understand what I meant, or sometimes it would feel like, okay, obviously you don't care. If you cared, you would respond. Like I would make meaning, because that's what we do. We make meaning. And my meaning making was always crap, a crappy situation. It was always some kind of negative thing. But what I learned is that, and especially for men, but you can have a physiological response, which is called flooding, which is literally his brain just basically, but your brain doesn't actually turn yourself off, but pull up that wall. Like it would send this, okay, too much information, too much stress hormone, too much cortisol suddenly spiking. And the brain is like, pull back, you can't handle this. And so for me, it really helped to learn that in those moments that he was actually having a physiological response. It wasn't just him being obstinate. It wasn't him not caring. It was his body literally on overload. It was his brain literally telling him, you can't handle this, pull back. And also for my husband, there was a piece of it of he didn't know what to say. So he felt like saying nothing was better than saying something he would regret, which can be a big piece as well.
Right.
And what helped us was we started to have essentially a boundary, a rule within our talking, was that when he started to feel flooded, learning how to pause, and I call it practicing the power of the pause, and taking deep breaths so that you can get your oxygen back up, because one of the responses of the human body is like we start to get upset and we tense up and then we breathe shallowly, so like slowing down, those kinds of things, and giving him the power to say, okay, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. And he was able to practice and recognize that, start to recognize, oh, I'm having these sensations in my body where I want to check out to what she's saying.
Right.
And then we would have, like, he could say, I need a break. And then he would guess, how long of a break do I need? And this is different for every situation, for every couple. At the time when we didn't have any children. So it was different because it was clear in the beginning, and, we could just say, there was a lot of time and space to have these conversations. It looks different when you have little kids and things like that. But the idea is the same, is that you pick a time and say, like, sometimes he'd say, and it was a 24-hour max for us. And sometimes he'd say, I need a day. Sometimes it would be an hour. Sometimes it would be 15 minutes. But the deal was that he had to come back and address it. And maybe he would come back and say, okay, I'm still not ready to talk about these things yet. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm feeling or thinking or whatever. But when he felt safe enough that he could say, okay, I need a break, then it allowed him to not feel so trapped and to be able to engage more, because he knew he had an exit if he needed it. And it was really hard for me to do, really hard, because you're asking that seeker to pause seeking, and you have to sit in those uncomfortable emotions and energy for a little while and learn how to set that aside. But with practice, I could do that because I knew that he would come back and we would talk about it and we would work through it. Where before, I didn't have that assurance. It was just shut down, and then I would panic, and it felt like this can't go on forever. That's what my system, my body and soul are telling me, like, you have to fix it right now. So it was just practice in that way.
Okay.
And that's a really helpful tip.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's good too, like taking that pause, because when you take that pause, then you look at the situation, and then you might even find yourself responding from a different place after you have time to think about it.
Absolutely. And with each of these traps, that's actually the very first step, is the power of the pause. And so the idea is you hear the traps, you learn about them, you're able to start to recognize. And as you practice, you'll be able to, one partner will be able to throw their hands up sooner within the cycle and say, whoa, like, look at what we're doing. We're falling into hide and seek. Let's pause. And it's so powerful to be able to do that. The other thing that does for a couple that's so beautiful is then it gets you on the same page, where when you're in conflict, you have one partner pitted against the other in one way or another. But when one of you, if you practice the power of the pause, then you can see it as, okay, this is us against the problem, against this cycle that we both tend to fall into. And so it puts you on the same page. And that is also a really great place to start. So that's hide and seek.
Great. Okay, let's move on to withdrawal and retreat.
Yes, let's move on to withdraw and retreat. Actually, can we do find the bad guy, blame game?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. So let's do that one. Often, like some couples don't do that, but sometimes people will start with that and then slide into, someone turns into the hider and seeker. You know, someone throws up their hands and walks out. But blame game is just what it sounds like. Mm-hmm. And these are your arguments that you think about when you think of an argument. It feels traditional, like, oh, they were arguing. It's when you have two active participants that are blaming the other person. And obviously, that one doesn't work. You're just arguing. You're arguing, you're blaming, you're on opposite ends, you're fighting. And and again, if you can pause and then find your way to that pause, then you can move on to the coping skills that come later in this conflict resolution approach.
Okay.
Yeah. And then withdraw and retreat is actually the most dangerous for the longevity of a relationship. So because this is where you start, that gap of disconnect just grows. And this, when you have, so this one is when both partners are no longer trying to connect. And so you both just withdraw from each other and retreat into your own places and your own lives. And you're not trying to connect anymore. It's basically having two hiders. And what ends up happening is it just gets wider and wider until you finally just decide, one or the other will just be like, okay, we're done. Why are we in this relationship? It's over. And that's why it's the most dangerous, is because nobody is seeking any kind of resolution at all.
Right. Nobody's getting their needs met. And
yeah,
everybody's lonely in the relationship.
Yeah. And the more often you fall into this pattern and the longer you stay into it, that's where it becomes eventually someone just leaves for short. But you can have any number of combinations. You can have people that start in the blame game and you're fighting and you're blaming each other, and then you both just walk away and say done. Or you can start in the blame game and go into, hide and seek. Or you can start in hide and seek and then eventually, and that happens a lot too. That's a very strong pattern and an indication that you need to seek some help right away. Like, look at your relationship. And if you have a partner who used to seek you out and that partner's not doing it anymore, do not fool yourself and think, oh, it's so much better. That partner is starting to retreat. They're starting to give up. They're going to be gone if you don't start to engage and create the bond that needs to be there.
Wow. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about recognizing what's going on in the relationship and having that awareness about what our coping skills are and what our defenses are and how we're participating in conflict.
So when you're looking at this, and if you can recognize, we've talked about recognizing the three things and having a pause, right? There are some other things that we can put some language around that will help you to be able to talk to your partner about what's happening. One of those things, like you mentioned, triggers. Anything could be a trigger, because trigger just means triggered a thought or triggered an emotion, right? And there are different levels of that. But I also teach people about raw spots. And I call them raw spots because it's like friction. If you have a spot on your skin, like on your foot, and you have a spot on your shoe that keeps rubbing on that, it's going to create a raw spot. It's going to create a blister. It's going to create something that's then sore. And we have emotional raw spots and sore spots within ourselves. And they don't come out of nowhere. They stem from our previous attachments, from our home growing up, from our traumas, from our past relationships. But this is another piece that is really good to be aware of. And you can start to recognize raw spots if your partner or you have a reaction that feels excessive, is a good way to put it, or that feels like it kind of came out of nowhere or surprising. Those are raw spots. And that's another thing it's just another piece to be aware of okay. Saying, okay, and then you can tell your partner, oh, we've hit on one of my raw spots, or we can be careful around this, please, because this is a raw spot. This is something that you're really tender around. And then after you've paused, it's important to do what I call a soft start. So that means, if you can, in an ideal world, we would all be able to do conflict resolution as quickly as the conflict comes up. But we don't live in an ideal world. And so a soft start means recognizing, like, where are you? What's happening right now in the home? What's happening right now with each person? Is one person super exhausted and tired? Is one person sick? So a soft start is when something comes up, if it's not something that you can address right then, or if you start to address it and one person gets overwhelmed, you want to say, okay, let's pick a soft start, and you pick a time and a place where then you can address it well, I guess is the best way to put it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, because you just want to, it's part of also being in tune with your partner. And, there's that old bit of advice where they say, never let the sun go down on your anger. That's terrible advice. That's terrible advice. Sometimes what you really need is just a good night's sleep. And then when you're fresh and not so tired and your brain is working better, then you can talk about it. If it's late at night and you're both exhausted, it's not a soft start. It's not a good time to do that. Or if your husband's had a hard day and he comes home and he says that, and you've been simmering with something all day, it's okay to come in and say, hey, here's what's on my plate, but I recognize you're not in a place to help me with it right now, or to handle this. When do you think you could be, or that kinds of thing. So a lot of conflict resolution is kind of recognizing, staging.
A lot of awareness about how our loved one is feeling.
Yes, but the beautiful
where they are and where you are within yourself.
Yes, but the beautiful thing about it is the more you practice this, the better you're going to get at it. And it's a build up. So at first, it probably seems overwhelming, time consuming for sure, because you're practicing. But you think the important thing is a mindset of thinking about it like I'm learning a skill. I'm practicing a skill. So think about how long it took you to learn how to tie your shoes. And when you were little and learning, and you sat down to tie your shoes, did it take you longer than it takes you now? Absolutely. A lot longer. But was it worth it? Was it worth learning how to tie your shoes? Yeah. So it's also that. It's like coming into, when you learn about these things, it's a mindset of being aware. I remember when my husband and I were first practicing this, and after we had gone through a conversation, worked through something, my husband said, he goes, oh, and I, what's the matter? And he goes, I'm not saying it's not worth it. It's great. We're worth it. You're worth it. But it's so exhausting. And he was like, what? The conversation's so hard. And because it is hard. Like, it's emotional work. It's emotional energy. And this does not come naturally to most people. It's not something that we really get taught. You just get whatever, like, luck of the draw family that you were born into. And their skills in this area is literally whatever luck of the draw they were born into.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of work, but it's so worth it, especially because not only do you reap the benefits, but when you look at it that way, like your children, the home they live in, they get to reap the benefits, but also they're learning and soaking it up so much. And it is such a gift to be able to offer your kids where they learn about conflict resolution and relationships by living in a home with two parents who are actively trying, and then they go into their own relationships in a better place. It's a huge gift.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love how you pointed out how rare it is that when we're growing up, it's the luck of the draw. We're not always taught those skills by example, right, in our lives. So these are skills that we need to learn as we're going into relationship, because we are mirroring what our parents did. They were mirroring what their parents did and bringing it together. And sometimes, two people come together and, one family had one type of skill and another family had another, and that can be a conflict within itself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why there's so much that goes into relationships, that when we first get into these relationships, we're on that that first part of love high, and we're so naturally so in tuned to our partners, and we're so just obsessed with them at first, and we're just love them and being with them, and it feels so good. And then life gets in the way, and yeah, we're just not taught these things. There is no class in high school about conflict resolution within any relationships, let alone intimate relationships. But the overarching look of it is you learn the mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
You learn to recognize these toxic traps, how to pause. And then in my program, I teach people what's called ARE conversations. You learn how to have ARE conversations, which are, they recognize attachment, and R is response, and E is engagement. And so you learn how to have conversations that address the attachment need, that are responsive, and then you become engaged in each other's lives. And it's, like I said, it's a build. And so then you can build. And we go into basically stopping the damage that's happening, pausing, teaching skills and practicing so that there's not new wounds. Then you can deal with some of the old stuff in a relationship. And the longer you've been in a relationship, usually the more stuff there's going to have that you're going to have. And then we move into, there's 3 pillars. So it's the mindset, the current, and then we move into a build and learn about things like bids for attachment, and fun, the importance of fun, and the importance of sex, those kinds of things, once we've gotten the relationship to a stable place. And it's just, it's the best feeling. It's the best feeling. It's the best feeling to be in, as a, like, to put in that work with your relationship and get the relationship to a place where you want it to be. And the world is kind of, I don't know, it's a wild place these days. And who doesn't want to feel like you have a partner that's with you in this, And then also, I just love it so much. as someone who has been there and worked through it, and I love it when I can see couples like reaching to each other to improve their lives and their kids' lives, and it's really great.
Yes, I agree. I want to step back a little bit and go back to ARE conversations. Can you give us a little bit of a highlight or example about what that would look like?
Yeah, so an ARE conversation starts with the recognizing and the pausing, like we talked about, and then it's really getting back to those basics that we were taught when we were kids. One of the main rules is manners matter, which sounds so cliche, but it is so true in that, like, show some appreciation. And you start to do things like practice appreciation, practice your manners. Like, how do you talk to your partner? How often are you saying thank you and please and excuse me? All those things. Like, part of ARE conversations is using your manners with your partner and practicing saying thank you. Just, I challenge my couples to spend 2 days, one weekend, just spend a weekend focusing on thanking your partner for every single thing that they do or say for you or your family. Everything.
Oh,
and see what happens there. See how that changes things. You will be amazed at the change that it can make. And it doesn't matter if you see them do it right then or later. It can be something that you noticed later. Or do it more than once. Thank them more than once. Like last night, my husband took down the Christmas tree. We have a fake one that has literally a whole tons of pieces. Every single branch is a different piece, right? I thanked him when he did it. And then this morning when I came out and the living room suddenly felt big again because there wasn't this big tree, I thanked him again because it's not a fun job. Like, how often are you thanking them for everything they do? And saying, please, are you just demanding? Are you just demanding that they do things, even if it's a part of, because there are some nuts and bolts things that we talk about that just are the day-to-day of being in a relationship, right? Who does the dishes? Who takes out the trash? Division of labor, childcare, money, all those topics, that are triggers, can be trigger points. But even if it's agreed, are you saying please and are you saying thank you? And how much grace are you giving? So there's lots of little things like that that go into it. And then, like I said before, I'm learning about what's a bid for connection. And that's the responsiveness piece. So the attachment piece is, are we working through things? Are we having manners? Oh, are we taking turns? That's the other one, is literally learning to sit down and take turns talking and take turns listening. And what does that mean? I teach about active listening, where you're listening without formulating your response in your mind. That's hard to do. Almost all of us start formulating our response before the other person's even done talking. So the attachment piece, different bolts and nuts and bolts there. The responsive piece is learning about attachment bids for connection. And bids for connection are things like my 6-year-old right now is, and you can use this in parenting too. It's not what I teach, but it will change your parenting life if you use attachment with your kids. Every day before school, almost every day, she calls for a family hug instead of just individual hugs. Usually, we are barely making it out the door on time. We do not have time for a family hug in the minute that she calls for it. Somebody's over there brushing their teeth. My husband's putting his lunch together. My son is trying to get his jacket on. And my daughter, suddenly the 6-year-old is like, family hug. But that is a bid for connection. That's what she's doing. And so even though it's such a pain right now, because it's like, we don't have time to get all 5 of us to come together for a group hug right in that moment. It just feels like every single day I want to be like, we don't have time right now. We're trying to get out the door. We're going to be late again. But we want to be responsive to that bid for connection. So that's an example of a bid. An example of a bid within a relationship is like, I love a good bargain. I love going to like a secondhand store and finding a really good deal. And my husband could care less. He does not care. But when I come home with my trunk full of my treasures and I say to him, babe, come see what I got, that's me offering him a bid for connection. And he responds by saying, okay, and letting me show him every piece and letting me tell him how much I got it for and how much it's actually worth, even though he couldn't care less. That's a bid for connection. My husband loves sunsets, sunrises. So when he says to me, Raini, come out here, and he wants to show me the sunrise and the sunset, that's a bid for connection, even if I'm in the middle of doing my hair or if I'm in the middle of making dinner. So we learn how to hit the R, is learn how to recognize those bids for connection and respond to them, even if you're just responding strictly out of that you love that person. And then the E piece, the engagement piece, is the build afterward. So talking about the importance of sex. It's such a big topic. It's a really hard topic because it's your body. Yes. And there's so much, it just packs such a huge emotional punch that it's a tough one, but you gotta touch on it, have to. And one important thing I think to mention is it is a myth that women don't have physical needs and men don't have emotional needs. Let's get rid of that. That is old thinking. It is not good thinking. It is not true. Women need sex just like men do. And men need a safe emotional place, and they need somewhere that they can express their emotion just as much as women do. We are whole creatures. We need it. It's just, yeah, that's a myth that gets in the way sometimes. But that's the E piece, is engagement, talking about sex and working your way through that, different kinds of sex that you can be having that are attachment feeding, but then also talking about boundaries and talking about, there's so much there. And then like date your mate. That's what I tell people. You got to date your mate. You can't give up. People change. People grow and change over the years. So the person that you've chosen is the person that you've chosen. But that's not the same boy you married. That's not the same girl you married. This is someone new, and you need to learn about that person. You need to be taking that person out on a date at least every other week, like out. Stay in, like set aside a time at least once a week, but you got to get out at least part of the time. And so talking about that too, like what's a strategy for dating your spouse in this crazy life we're in, and how much, like Netflix and chill is great for some of the time, but you also need to be doing some other types of dates that are engaging and connective and creating this friendship that you have and that you want to thrive. So that's ARE, relationships or conversation.
All so important information. It's so important for us to engage with each other, to have sex with each other all of the time, it really creates a nice, strong bond. I know connection in the morning really sets like the pace for the whole entire day and keeps that connection. Even if you're like just putting a hand on someone's shoulder throughout the day, or just making those really soft, sweet connections, then that opens up something for later in the evening. And then, like you said, date, going on dates, finding those ways to, have fun. You're in a relaxed atmosphere, everybody's enjoying themselves, and you get to connect in that way too. I think that everything that you said is really important. Even the myth, about men and women, I think is a game changer.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And it's all a build, but when you can get into a place where you see it as a skill you can learn, then it becomes like you get the confidence. I can do this. We can do this. And as you work through with your partner, you start to see like that you can, and then it becomes fun. And then it becomes fun. And then conflict isn't as scary when you know that it's a vehicle for connection. And it's all going to build. After that, once you get that upward momentum, then it's like nothing can hold you back. And it's so great, and it's so much fun, and it's so wonderful.
I love how you pointed out how conflict is a way to connection as well, too, because I think when we open up and we become vulnerable with each other, when we don't lose connection, even if we're sitting there and we're holding hands while we're working through conflict, not breaking that connection and really listening to each other and responding to each other and being present for each other and resolving it instead of it, being more than it needs to be, I think is all creates connection. And that's really what we want in a relationship. And that, that
Absolutely.
those our inner children who have those attachments, that's what, those little pieces inside of ourselves really want, that security, the groundedness of relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's little tricks too. There's so many things that go into it, like facing your partner. Like you said, there's things like love rituals, things that you do that are important, that you do no matter what, no matter how you feel about that person. And the thing is, it's a big ask. And in vulnerability, you hit it on the head. Like that is the piece. Like we are learning how to be vulnerable with our partner. So you're creating safety, and you do it little by little, because a lot of us, it's brand new. The feeling of vulnerability is brand new for men and women. We all walk around, with our public mask on. And so it's just little by little, you're learning how to be vulnerable, learning how to be safe with your partner. And then part of the build process too is recognizing what kinds of things feel more connective. Like Gary Chapman's love languages are a huge piece of relationships, which is the idea that we each feel love in a different way. And so sometimes your partner, they're like a language, and sometimes your partner speaks a different language than you. So you might be speaking love to your partner in a way that they don't understand. Like for me, acts of service is a huge thing. So if I'm doing something over and over again and I'm thinking, don't you appreciate me? Look at all I've done for you. But my partner's love language is physical touch. And they're like, it's been 3 weeks since we had sex. That's just a miscommunication of love languages. And that's another piece of building that you can learn about and learn and practice speaking this language that will speak to your spouse.
Love that. Yes. Get curious about each other.
Yes.
That's awesome. As we come to a close, is there anything that we missed that you would like our audience to hear?
Not about the overall process in particular. I do like to share about me specifically a little, if you don't mind if I do that.
Please do.
I like to share that so I love helping couples, all different kinds of couples. It doesn't matter. Studies show that it does not, like, we are just connective creatures. So it doesn't matter if you're in a heterosexual relationship or if you're in a same-sex relationship, like you're still going to have these attachments, you're still going to have these toxic traps, you're still going to be able to reconnect and rebuild in the same kinds of ways. So that doesn't matter. Because of my personal history, I left a high demand religion, and my husband was in still for a while and then left later. So I do like to mention, just for people to know, that that's also something that I really specialize in, because I have experience in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that religious piece is another huge topic. The top 3 things that couples fight about: sex, money, and power. And when we're talking about power, we're talking about the dynamic in the home, those kinds of things, like parenting and who makes decisions and that kind of thing. But another big topic is a couple's faith life. And when you come into a relationship under one premise, and then people learn and grow and change, and then that changes, it's a really, really big deal. Your religious beliefs, your faith beliefs are huge. And so I just like to mention that that's also something that I have a lot of experience and know-how, is helping couples move through that. Again, because my husband and I did that.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Raini.
Yeah.
Is there a jewel of wisdom that you would like to leave us with today?
Oh, man. One jewel of wisdom. Honestly, I think just the biggest thing is believing that you're capable. That, to me, that's what it is. It's just, you can do this. It's so hard when you're in a relationship that's struggling. I remember that, like we would see a counselor once a week, and I remember feeling like the week took so long. Like it just felt like it took forever to get back to our counselor, and that so much would happen, and it was so disheartening. And so I just like to tell people, like, you've got this. You really do. You've got this. You can do it. You can learn this. You can practice it, and you will get to where it's second nature. It's old hat. Like, it won't always be so hard. And I think it's important for people to remember that when they're in the thick of it.
Nice. I love that. And before you go, please share with our audience your blog, and you also have a free offer for everyone.
Yeah. So the blog is for people who, if you want to know more about me. So the blog, it's a personal blog. It's about my story. It's about my journey leaving Mormonism was the religion that I left. So it's about my opinions about Mormon topics. It's more just like my personal passion project, right? So if you want to know more about me, the blog is rockymountainrain.blog. And I write there at least twice a week is my goal. And it's, I really love it. And I feel like it's helpful too, because we just want to connect with the world and know that we're not alone. That's really it. Like, we just want to know that other people have experienced what we've experienced. And the blog is my way of reaching back, honestly, to the person I was when I first started my faith journey, and what I like to call a faith expansion, which we could do a whole nother hour on that. But that's what the blog is.
Nice.
And then the offer is, I offer a free conflict resolution training on my website. So if you want to get that, I go into all these different topics that we've talked about in greater depth. And it also comes with a PDF workbook that you can do. And it's on my website. You can just go, you put in your email, and then I email it to you. And it's my free gift to people, because I just love people and I want to help as much people as I possibly can. And I can't work with everybody, but I can offer this to everybody. So the website is rainishaecoaching.com.
Great.
And they can also find me on Facebook at Raini Shae. I run a Facebook group there, and I teach live in the Facebook group, and they can email me, and Once you find one website, it's all connected. You can find me.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Raini. That's awesome. And thank you for that free offer. Really appreciate it. Everybody go check that out. Raini, this has been fantastic. The information here has been great. What a great way to start the new year and season 4. I really appreciate you and what you've brought to Raise the Vibe with Liz. And I know my listeners are thinking the same things. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And thank you everyone for listening. Again, this is Raise the Vibe with Liz, and I'm your host, Liz Peterson. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Raise the Vibe with Liz. And remember to like and subscribe and share. And remember also to get out there and raise the vibe. Thank you for joining me, everyone, and have a great day. Thanks for listening.